First of all, let me congratulate you, sir, on becoming the Speaker of this National Assembly. Secondly, I would like to extend my deepest sympathies to our Honorable Minister, Cathy, on the passing of your mother-in-law. Mr. Speaker, the opportunity to serve in this Assembly that represents the pinnacle of decision-making for the governance of Guyana is a great honor and privilege for me. While I have been engaged in politics for a long time, and have especially been engaged with the PPP in the 80s, in the struggle for the return of freedom and democracy from the PNC dictatorship, I have never sought or have been interested in political office. However, I do see ominous signs and dangers of us falling back into those dark times, and having considered, I believe that I can make a contribution for us to stay on course and advance the freedom and democracy that was restored and nurtured by the PPP in the last 2 decades. Mr. Speaker, it is my conviction that, like myself, the purpose and desire of every member sitting in this august assembly is to work for and to contribute selflessly and honorably for the creation of a highly developed, peaceful, and safe Guyana. A Guyana where every citizen is valued and can enjoy his or her life in peace, in comfort, and in dignity. A Guyana where opportunity is equal and access is unrestricted, and where everyone, irrespective of race, religion, or gender, has the opportunity and the best chance to fulfill his or her potential. However, with due regard to the fact that we all want the same thing, it is perhaps unfortunate that we are organized on two sides in essential opposition to each other, and are too often trapped into opposing for opposing's sake. While this arrangement of governance and opposition may be the highest form of a democratic governance, the eye on the vote to win elections can too often lead to battles to obstruct the one or the other side to the detriment of the national interest. Our progress since independence, or lack thereof perhaps, belie my conviction that all are united and agreed in wanting a better Guyana over and above everything else. At the onset, therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to exhort that we always refer in all our deliberations and decision-making to that vision for a better Guyana, which we all share. That commitment to service to which we all subscribe. Let it at all times inform our deliberations and prevent us from being diverted or seduced by oppositionism, prejudice, and petty zero-sum games of ethnic advantage. It is perhaps opposite for those members who were on this side in the last Parliament and who are now sitting on that side to reflect and determine if it was in good conscience that they served Guyana. And when they blocked or refused to support any number of important legislations from the then minority government. For example, since before I was born and all through my life growing up, I was told that Guyana needs cheap, clean energy if we were going to be able to take advantage of our natural resources for development. And we heard that we had a great potential for hydropower. How much was done to actualize these words? The last government advanced the process of hydropower, had the project for execution, had money expended to be, had the project for execution, had arrangements for financing, and you blocked it. The time, effort, and money extended have been reduced to naught, zero. Was it opposition for opposition's sake? We all know how much harm can occur to Guyana if we did not comply with the anti-money laundering legislation, but you refused to cooperate. Mr. Speaker, was it opposition for opposition's sake? Again, I call on all. Let us not oppose for opposition's sake. Let us work for Guyana. Here, allow me to quote Dr. Clive Jagan from his speech in this assembly on May 1966, when the instruments of our sovereignty were being passed to us. And I quote, "Parliamentary democracy has an important place in this country, and the heavy onus lies on us all, but more particularly on the government to see that it works," unquote. Mr. Speaker, our history and our development in the period before independence and since independence have been a roller coaster ride with peaks and troughs. And the peaks have been under the watch of the PPP, and the trough has been under the watch of the other group. Mr. Speaker, we cannot go on like this. We must always move up, up, and further up. The economy taken over by the PNC-UF coalition in 1964 was a growing economy. The education system was among the best in the Caribbean. To quote from the first line of Chapter 18 of the National Development Strategy, 2001 to 2010, and I quote, "Guyana's educational system was considered to be one of the best in the Caribbean during the 1960s, and it is probably among the weakest today." Today, of course, refers to the 1990s, when this strategy was being undertaken. We had sugar, we had rice, we had timber, we had bauxite, we had gold, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we had a young, energetic, and imaginative population with the will and desire to build a great country. We were seen as the country that could become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Unfortunately, by the time the PNC was done, we had a shrunken economy. We had little sugar and we had little rice, and we were the basket case of the Caribbean. And most importantly, the PNC, paramount in all things, had beaten the population down into pessimism and pushed them into immigration that even to this day we cannot stem. By the time they were done, we were a highly indebted, low-income country with inflation of over 100% and a currency that had moved from Guyana $2 to 1 US to 125 Guyana dollars to 1 US. Mr. Speaker, they did not improve the electricity generation capacity, barge and all. And by 1992, the PPP inherited barely 50 to 60 megawatts of installed capacity with old turbines and generating equipment beyond repair and a decrepit distribution system. Water, even in the city, was unreliable, inconsistent, and brown. Most of the rest of the country had no potable water. We may recall images of little children with little carts moving buckets of water on the East Coast and on the East Bank. The institutions of democracy were totally undermined. We had no free press. We had rigged elections. What are we getting today after the Herculean efforts of the PPP in the last 2+ decades? We have an education system that is clawing its way back to be comparable to the best in the Caribbean, with more than 460 schools distributed equitably to the furthest reaches of the country, and primary enrollment above 95% compared to the dismal under 70% in the PNC years. More children are graduating from primary school and more entering secondary schools and matriculating with 5 or more CSEC subjects. The number of persons in the workforce with tertiary education is up from 3 to 5% in the 80s to 7 to 9%. The exchange rate has stabilized. Rice is at an all-time high of 60,000 tons per year, and 600,000 tons per year. And gold and timber have been making increasing contributions to our GDP. Life expectancy, Mr. Speaker, is up to 70 from 60, which was in the 60s, and had stagnated through the PNC years. Electricity generation is now over 225 megawatts, not counting the solar energy installations in the hinterland. The equipment is new, and the distribution system is improved and rationalized. The number of households connected to electricity has increased in all parts of the country.
Honourable Member, you have 7 minutes remaining.
Thank you, sir. There is more than 83% access to potable clear water, not the brown muddy water of the PNC years. All across the country, in more than 145,000 homes, people can turn their taps and get water. The institutions of democracy have never flourished as they flourish now. Let us watch the Stabroek and Kaieteur news and see how they will strut their pomp and ridicule in their coming months. There are more radio stations, there are more television stations, more online news. This very assembly has become a place free from fear in the last 20 years, where representatives freely and fairly elected could have expressed their views, and where inclusivity was institutionalized through select parliamentary committees. Who will dispute the autonomy and the freedom of GCOM from interference from the previous government? From the previous government, sir. So say what you will. The PPP never compromised in its commitment to freedom and democracy. It has had its quarrels with these institutions, but it did not ban them nor stifle them. Mr. Speaker, by any parameter, the country which has been handed over to the now AFC-APNU coalition is a better country than the PPP inherited in 1992. All the important indices have become better than they were in 1992. In short, we were better off on May 11, 2015 than we were on October 5th, 1992. From a least developing country, it has become a middle developing country with a GDP that has grown from US $250 in 1992 to more than $3,700 US today. Mr. Speaker, I'm an optimist and I believe in a greater Guyana, but unfortunately, I'm already seeing portents of a return to the dark days of economic woes and dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, all across the world, as countries grapple with their economic problems, the mantra is job creation, job creation. But in the first 100 days of this government, what do we see? We see job destruction. Already, this government has fired more than 3,000 to 4,000 people, and the private sector has probably had to lay off another 3,000 to 4,000. And what is worse, they have assaulted one of the most vulnerable communities in the country, the Amerindian people. Mr. Speaker, on August the 9th, Guyana joined the rest of the world in celebrating International Day of the world's indigenous people, and the Secretary General of the United Nations called on all to ensure that our indigenous people are not left behind. But what has this government done? It has fired nearly 2,000 Amerindian workers and immediately threw them and their families into hardships without any second thought.
Honourable Member, you have 3 minutes remaining.
Thank you, sir. We see that dark dictatorial attitude reminiscent of that period we want never to happen again. When a deputy CEO in the company of police officers marches into a workplace and put 2 staff out of their jobs. And Mr. Speaker, in all these firings, we are seeing the first signs of ethnic cleansing. Mr. Speaker, what good life is in store for those people who are out of jobs? We also see duplicity and deceit. This budget might have raised the old age pension, but it removed the subsidy of water and electricity from these pensioners. The net effect is that they would be worse off. Is that a good life? Mr. Speaker, judging from the performance of this new regime, even in the early days, does not inspire confidence. The ominous signs are not good for a good life for Guyanese. The signs of regression are already there. I wish, Mr. Speaker, to take this opportunity to call on my colleagues across the floor to clear your heads, rise above pettiness, to free yourself from obsolete ideas and pigheadedness in wanting to prove those ideas right, and to reboot yourself to selfless, unambiguous, and intelligent service to our country. I challenge you to show us that you too can be inclusive and that you too can move Guyana forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for his statement.